Hello, RWorld, and welcome back to another episode of RWorldTalk. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Zach Nyberg. You are the Senior Manager of Consulting for John Burns Research and Consulting here in South Florida.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Last time I saw you, we were at the RWorld Commercial Symposium. You gave us a fantastic presentation. But tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're the expert on all things research and consulting for South Florida.
Yeah, so just to start with a little background on myself, I'm a Florida native, born and raised in Martin County, Florida. I went to school up in Tallahassee at Florida State University, where I got my finance and management degrees there. And for the past 5.5 years, I've been working with John Burns Research and Consulting in their consulting division. So as a global, our firm, we produce monthly level housing market research for all metro areas across the United States, producing reports for home builders, apartment developers, building product manufacturers, and other groups. On the consulting side of the business, what I do is I work on site-specific projects for developers, helping them prove out the feasibility of the projects that they're envisioning and making sure that those are not only going to be profitable from an economic standpoint, but adding to the community as well. So over the last 5 years, I've had the pleasure of working on hundreds of consulting studies across Florida and the Southeast on all things from typical for-sale housing developments to apartment communities, mixed-use projects, and everything in between. So yeah, really excited to be here today.
So you know your stuff.
Yes, safe to say I have an opinion or two to share.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's jump right into it. How do you foresee the evolving demographics of South Florida impacting the housing market, let's say, over the course of the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple of demographic trends that we probably are all familiar with today in Florida that I expect to continue over the 5 years. Think groups like retirees. Retirees have always been attracted to South Florida. I think that is continuing to hold. But one thing that's a little bit of a spin on that is that now we're seeing kind of a new type of retiree that's moving to Florida. Traditionally, it was just the people who wanted to get away from their lives in the Midwest or the Northeast, go and retire to a warm, sunny climate. But as South Florida has become more of a destination for families as well, we're finding that there's a bunch of retirees that are moving to the area, really trying to just be close to their family and their grandchildren. So one of the opportunities that we're seeing kind of with that shift is more demand for multi-generational housing. So think things like a mother-in-law suite or just a formal separate space for those in-laws or your grandparents to live with you guys at home there. Okay. So that's one of the trends that we're seeing. Another one that we've been seeing since the pandemic is an influx of remote workers coming down to South Florida, and they're definitely impacting the real estate industry here. Oftentimes, these people are coming from higher cost of living markets like a New York or a New Jersey, and they're bringing down their higher paying jobs with them. So for these people, while housing for some locals has starting to get a little bit unaffordable, for those people that are moving into the area, bringing in their high-paying jobs, South Florida is still a screaming deal for them, and they're continuing to be attracted down to South Florida. Okay. The final thing that I want to touch on with the demographics is kind of South Florida's emergence as a destination for ultra-high net worth individuals, really on a global scale. Miami in particular has really landed on the global map. And not only is this where these ultra high net worth individuals want to live and reside, this is where they want to invest their money as well. So in addition to all the relocations that we're seeing from across the country, we're seeing a lot of international demand from really wealthy families as well, just trying to find a safe haven to park their money in South Florida. And real estate is a great way to do that here.
You just sold me, man. Okay, I'm ready to move down to South Florida if I'm hearing this right now and have not made the move yet. Where do you see the most of those people coming from? Are there specific countries that you see the really high net worth individuals coming from?
Yeah, so South Florida has always been popular with Central and South America. I think that trend continues to roll on steadily as it has been over the last several decades. The one new area where we're seeing a lot of interest in foreign investment is from like the Middle East and like Saudi America, or those places like that. They are really taking an interest to South Florida, especially as the global economy is starting to, I wouldn't say destabilize, but America is still a safe bet relative to the rest of the world in terms of where people want to make their investments for the future.
Okay, fantastic. Can you share some insights on how the national, I didn't realize that you guys worked all across the country. I thought that this was, you focused your efforts on South Florida because you had given us so much great information on South Florida when I saw you last time. But in your analysis, what are some like unexpected trends in the South Florida housing market that investors should be aware of?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question, and one thing that surprised me, just from a kind of a counterintuitive point of view, is the interest among wealthy families in the western suburbs of all of South Florida. So thinking of places like Davie, Southwest Ranches, out in West Boca, up in West Palm Beach at some of the new developments like Avenir or Westlake.
Right.
Those are really attracting kind of like the move-up family buyer that you would expect that wants to live as close to the beach and the coast as possible.
Right.
Well, they're really being attracted out to those western suburbs. And when I was thinking about it, there's a couple of reasons for that. The first of all is that there is the land available for new master plan development. So when people are creating places out in these western suburbs, a developer really can be intentional about their design in terms of making sure that it has walkable sidewalks, nice streetscapes, safe neighborhood design in terms of mitigating traffic and maybe points of contention there. So I think the developers really have a good opportunity to do placemaking out there, kind of creating like a little suburban utopia. Whereas if those families were looking for opportunities maybe closer to the established city centers or central business districts, they're going to find that they are working in or they're looking for homes in older neighborhoods without that kind of intentional design from the beginning.
Right.
And they're going to find that they are not able to kind of go for that new, nice, modern housing in a safe setting like they would if they're looking out west. So that's one thing that's definitely surprised me, especially the one example that comes back to my mind is Avenir up in Palm Beach Gardens. They're frequently selling homes. Almost all of them are over $1 million right now.
Yep.
And you're 30, 45 minutes from the beach. 5-10 years ago, I don't think something like that would have been feasible, but just with the shifts that we've seen over the last several years, that's becoming more and more appealing for those type of buyers.
So you're a Florida native. Let me ask you, how many times do you go to the beach in a year?
Not as much as I should, that's for sure. It is definitely something that we take for granted a little bit, living in and working by the beach so often. Yeah. But I will say that when I do get out there, it really reminds you why it's all worth it. If you're waking up early enough to go and see a sunrise at the beach, that really reminds you why you love living in South Florida and why everybody is trying to get in on the action here.
Yeah, for sure. I moved here many years ago, and when I first moved down, it was like every single weekend, hitting the beach, having a good time, and then life catches you and you're working and there's other things that you do with your weekends as opposed to sitting on the beach. A lot of people have pools and just spend time in their backyard, but it's always funny. Every time I go to the beach, I'm like, why don't I do this more? Always great to be down there. Okay, let's talk about the national economic shift. So can you share some insights on how national economic shifts are influencing real estate dynamics down here in the Florida real estate market?
Yeah, so I think the one big thing that is kind of comes to the top of the mind is the interest rate situation, because that impacts home buyers across the country. Our in-house view for the interest rate picture moving forward the next 2 to 3 years is that they are going to come down a little bit, especially as the Fed starts pulling back and doing those rate cuts. We're expecting that activity to start in the second half of this year in 2024 and continue over the next 2 years, probably finding a good middle ground in like the high 5s or low 6s in terms of like average rates. But I will say that those can vary dramatically depending on your personal situation and maybe some incentives that other mortgage companies are offering at the time.
Okay.
So from a high level perspective, I think the national or South Florida is somewhat insulated from the national economy because we have such a pro-business, pro-growth environment that some of the anti-business policies that may be occurring in other states are really pushing businesses to Florida that may not have wanted to relocate, but now they're being forced to look for an alternative. So over the last several years, we've seen a ton of companies relocating from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and I think that is going to definitely continue over the next couple of years. One other thing that I think I brought up earlier, and another reason why South Florida is a little bit influenced, is because of our well-diversified economy that we have down here in terms of 3 international airports, the deep water ports, the rail system, and all of the interest from international investment. I think those are all very good things to have going for South Florida relative to the rest of the economy. And I do have one or two quick stats to share on that point.
Yeah,
so the South Florida region was the number one for year-over-year employment growth, growing 2.8% year-over-year compared to the national average of 2.2%.
Number one around the country.
Around the entire country. Wow. South Florida region, number one. And we were also number one among high income sector job growth. So think things like information and technology and finance. We were the number one region for that job growth as well, coming in at about 3.3% growth year over year. So really, yes, our economy is firing on all cylinders here. And I think we are in a much better position just because of the policies that are pro-business in South Florida versus the rest of the country.
Okay, fascinating information. What role do you believe technology and innovation will play in shaping the future of South Florida? You just touched on some of that we've got a lot of those jobs coming down. But what do you think it will play into? What kind of a role do you think it'll play in shaping South Florida's economy?
Yes. So the economy overall, obviously those influx of new employers with a focus on that space are going to have the most kind of direct and tangible impact in terms of bringing down high earning employees that work at those firms. But I think for the real estate industry specifically, there's a couple of things that are going on that you guys should be aware of. So first of all is the access to information is becoming so much kind of more evenly spread across the kind of space here. So not only is data becoming cheaper and oftentimes free to get, it's becoming much more real time. Instead of looking back 2 or 3 months in arrears, you can see stuff that happened yesterday on the market in real time. And I think that kind of levels out the playing field in some instances for both potential buyers and potential investors in the market, is just having that equal access to information. Another kind of facet of technology that we're seeing is the prop tech that's coming in. So now there's a whole suite of prop tech services and solutions that both property managers and users can employ. And it's really making the management of these properties a lot more efficient in terms of things like turnover, operations, management, and maintenance there. And then also on the user experience side. So me as like an apartment renter myself, I now have a portal on my phone where I can schedule service. I can schedule service for like maintenance in my apartment. I can automatically go through and do my renewals. I can do my bill pay, everything like that from one app on my phone. And I think that's a really convenient experience for people versus having to go into the leasing office or maybe speak with somebody in person, especially when you work from 9 to 5, and there's the same hours that your apartment office building is open from 9 to 5. So I think breaking down those barriers really makes it a lot easier from both a user and a management standpoint. And then the final point that I wanted to touch on the technology here is that all of these technologies are really kind of just bringing everybody kind of closer together and really going back to that idea earlier of the equal access to the technology across all platforms. It really is just leveling the playing field in terms of no longer do you guys have to start your search by going in and out and paying for a resource or paying for a trusted advisor to get that to you. You can really start your search on your own, very low barriers to entry. And then when you're ready to take that next step, then you can go and get a professional involved. So those are some of the ways I'm seeing technology impact real estate in South Florida here.
Okay. Yeah, prop tech and fintech have been, two big buzzwords for the last few years now. And it seems like so many more players are jumping into that space and creating technology that makes the user experience so much better. And I would imagine that even on the investor side as well, to have access to that sort of technology. So like you said, you're, renewing your leases and paying your bills and everything right through that one platform, which would make things a lot easier for the investor as well as the tenant as well. So from your research, what advice would you give to a first-time home buyer looking to enter the South Florida market with the current economic climate?
Yeah, well, as somebody who is an apartment renter right now and kind of casually searching for my first home, I'm in the same boat as a lot of people down here.
You're going to have 42,000 realtors calling you in about an hour.
Yes, I will. I'm already working with my mom. She's a realtor up in Martin County there, so I'm taken from that note. But I would say the first thing that I've been doing is just acknowledging that I need a budget. And I think it all starts with having a good budget and understanding what you can afford versus what you can qualify for, because those are often two different answers. The rule of thumb that I've heard is around 30% of your gross income should be budgeted towards that housing expense, being everything included but your utilities there. But I understand that that's not feasible for everybody and that sometimes that ratio needs to go a little bit higher. We've seen no problems with people doing that as long as they don't have heavy debt loads from other sources like an auto loan or student loan debt or credit card debt. If you have all three of those, I would really try to stick to that 30% margin. But if you don't have any of those, then feel free to push it a little bit more on what you can afford in terms of housing there. My second piece of advice for first-time home buyers would be to work with a local realtor, such as anyone in this network here. I think in addition to kind of the standard services that you get, which are really just a good understanding of the entire buying and selling process, all of the legal requirements that you may know, they can really provide some really great local insights if you're working with the right realtor in terms of what's the reputation of this neighborhood? How is the traffic here? What kind of developments are planned in these currently vacant parcels that you may have an expectation of staying one way, but may be developed and completely change the landscape in the next 5 years. So I think working with a really local realtor who's really knowledgeable about the area can provide you with a pretty big knowledge advantage in terms of determining what you actually want. And then the third thing I would advise is to just get creative with how you guys are looking at homes. So one thing that might seem counterintuitive is that new home prices right now are typically higher than an existing home price on average. But the builders are offering great incentives right now, which really might help to kind of close that gap between the payment that you'd be making on a resale home and a new home. For example, some of the national home builders like Lennar and D.R. Horton, it's not uncommon for them to be buying rates down from mid to high sixes into low fives or even in the high 4% range. Right. So you could potentially afford to spend $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 more on a new home and have the exact same payment as you would on a lesser priced resale home. So I think that's one way that buyers can kind of stretch their affordability a little bit more. The next thing that I personally am considering is, do you need to move into that gorgeous, newly renovated, move-in ready home? Or for your needs as a first-time home buyer, could you be accepting of purchasing the fixer-upper and making those improvements that you want slowly over time? Right. Obviously, you don't get everything that you want on day one, but it also gives you the opportunity to build equity as you make those improvements and really custom tailor those improvements to your specific needs versus buying something that was somebody else's dream. You really get to create it on your own. Right. And the final piece of advice is just being in, this is another reason why you need to work with a local realtor, because there's so much more information available through the MLS systems than you would see from sources like a Redfin or a Zillow. You can go and look at the previous sale history and the listing and see if the current owners have done a renovation since they've purchased the home, right, or if they're selling the exact same home 3 or 4 years later, trying to sell it for double the price, for example. One thing that I'm personally looking for during my home search is looking for a buyer who didn't buy their home in the last 3 to 5 years and are trying to sell it as a huge profit. I'm trying to find somebody who's maybe owned their home since the early 2000s or the 90s even, and values have obviously skyrocketed since then, but maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room for that seller than for the buyer who purchased at the height of the market in 2021 and is now trying to sell it for a big profit today. So those, I think, are some good advice for first-time home buyers as they're trying to navigate the market right now.
Yeah, that is great advice. And if you happen to be a home buyer and not a realtor, but listening to this podcast, even if you're going to a new home developer, take a realtor with you, because they oftentimes will have a relationship with the developer, might be able to get you a little bit of wiggle room on that purchase price, and then, of course, walk you through the entire process and help you with your punch list at the end when the builder goes to deliver the home and you find out, oh, well, they didn't paint the spaceport and there's a nick in this wall. And, you know, obviously, if you're buying a brand new home, important to have somebody know exactly what's going on. Even if it's a brand new home, I would still have it inspected as well, which a realtor could certainly help you find a home inspector. But I do like your comments on having a fixer-upper. If you're a first-time home buyer, there's nothing wrong with, you know, if you've got a house that's got great bones, take some time, do the kitchen over time, do your bathrooms over time, replace the floors over time. And some of those projects could be fun. You'd be surprised what you could actually do with your own two hands.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a lot of YouTube videos out there that'll show you how to lay plank flooring or do tiling or whatever. That you could really save yourself some money by doing it on your own.
That's very true, and that's kind of what I've started doing in my spare time is watching home improvement YouTube videos, or a lot of time on HGTV now, watching all those Fixer to Fabulous kind of shows and stuff like that. But one thing that I think is maybe difficult for a first-time home buyer to kind of swallow is that a lot of them have been living in like pretty nice or luxurious even apartments, and they're transitioning from a very, very high-end rental to trying to accept what they view as something that was, from their childhood when they were growing up, seeing those late 90s, early 2000s finishes in the homes. It feels like a step back for them in terms of just what you can see. But I think having kind of the global mindset that you're buying into, you're making an investment not only in yourself for today, but for the future. And really, like you mentioned, it can be fun to do those kind of projects too. Definitely takes a certain type of person that can live with the chaos and the construction going on as that process unfolds. But I think at the end of the day, it'll be very satisfying for most buyers.
And it could be very taxing on a relationship, so you just have to stay calm. Okay. Next up, regarding the commercial real estate sector, how do you see the business climate in South Florida evolving? What impact might this have on commercial property investments and development? And I know that you are not maybe the expert in all things commercial, but certainly in multifamily.
Yeah. So to reiterate a couple of the points that I brought up earlier, I think South Florida's economy has a lot going for it, which is going to continue to attract businesses to this area. So in addition to kind of all those tangible points that I brought up, like the 3 international airports, the no state income tax, the deep water ports that we have, the access to capital from both national and international sources, we have the intangibles too, just like the weather and the fact that people want to be in South Florida, not only for business purposes, but to live the lifestyle that they have dreamed of their entire life. So I think from that perspective, businesses are going to be continued to attracted to South Florida. Now, I do think that over the next 5 to 10 years, the growth is going to look a little bit differently than what it has been over the last 3 to 5 years. A couple of reasons for this. The first is rising costs. So there are rising development costs associated with new buildings, rising labor and material costs associated with ongoing properties. And finally, even just like the rents that you would be paying for commercial space have risen. So the barriers to entry to getting into the South Florida market have definitely gone up. But that has not deterred the interest. It's just made it a little bit less feasible for some businesses than others. Another reason why I think the growth is going to be a little bit slower than it has been in the past is the fact that a lot of the areas near the central business districts are starting to run out of pre-approved developable parcels. So whereas over the last 3 to 5 years, we may have seen, it seems like on every other street corner, new mid and high-rise buildings going up, being office, apartments, condos, or a mix of all three of those. I think now we're going to see a bigger push towards redevelopment efforts and projects that need to have rezoning occur. And those will get done over time. But that process just takes more time, money, and effort to have those things translate from a concept to reality. So some of those projects are going to happen. It's just going to be slower than what we've seen in the past. And the final note that I'll bring up is that there is no shortage from the business owners in terms of wanting to move their properties down here. But one of their biggest concerns is having access to labor in this market. And the real kind of underlying concern related to that is a lack of affordable housing solutions that are near the central business districts. So a lot of these business owners are like, hey, I want to relocate to South Florida. I think it would be great for my business. I can afford to go and get my $1 million home. But where are my employees who are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year? Where are they going to live? So I think one of the big opportunities that is going to help catalyze all of the growth in South Florida is a big push towards more affordable, or not affordable in the traditional sense where it's necessarily subsidized by taxes or, local government partnerships, but just more so attainable housing in the fact that a working class family can comfortably afford those either purchase costs or the rents without being cost burden. I think that will allow for a lot more employees to move into the area and live a good lifestyle, right, which will in turn attract more businesses to come down to South Florida as well. And I think that is one of the key solutions to continuing the growth that we've experienced over the last 3 to 5 years here.
Yeah, the state of Florida has done so many things in order to try and address the affordability crisis that we're having, especially in South Broward counties like Broward and Miami-Dade are incredibly unaffordable. But there's new programs that are out there like the Live Local Act and Hometown Heroes program that had really injected a lot of money to help those people be able to afford living where they are, being able to live where they work. You know, when you talk about police, fire, people who work at the beach and all the bars and restaurants that we like to frequent, those people need somewhere to live. And it's very, very unaffordable in this current climate, but certainly looking forward to things that are on the horizon. Is there anything that I left out that you think would be important for our people to hear?
Yeah, one trend, because it's kind of related to or it's caused by the unaffordability from a local perspective, is in addition to all the great in-migration that we're seeing from international markets and other markets across the country, we are kind of seeing a shift amongst locals down in South Florida, really leaving the high cost of living areas near the central business districts and moving further out in search of affordability. So we are seeing tons of people moving out of Miami and then up into Broward County because their dollar can go a little bit further there. In the same kind of vein, we're seeing people move out of Broward County and kind of everybody's going to the next county up. So
north, yeah.
Miami's going to Broward, Broward's going to Palm Beach, and Palm Beach is going up to Martin and even St. Lucie. There's a lot of new home development up in St. Lucie County in particular that's a lot more attainably priced than what you could get down here in South Florida. One example, I won't name the builder, but there's a builder who builds in Palm Beach County and up in St. Lucie County. Okay. Exact same home, exact same size, floor plan, everything. $600,000 price gap between living up in Port St. Lucie or living down here in Palm Beach County.
Wow.
So thinking about somebody who maybe 5 years ago had to go into the office 5 days a week, they would really want to be somewhere that's really close to their office and might be very inclined to purchase that more expensive home. But in today's world where a lot of office workers have some sort of hybrid arrangement, maybe you only have to go into the office 2 or 3 days a week, now maybe they're willing to live 30, 45 minutes from their job center and really opening up a wide range of housing solutions for those folks that may not have had that option in years past. So I think that's maybe one other trend to keep an eye on, is the fact that people can now live further and further from their actual physical jobs.
Okay, fantastic. So one last question, and then we're going to let you get back to work and do some more research. I like to ask this question of all of our guests. We talk about South Florida and having we have a lot of hidden gems down here. So what's a restaurant, beach, hotel, something that you think is worth checking out? What's your, from a local's perspective, what's a South Florida hidden gem that
I have two. One's not such a hidden gem, and that's Flanagan's in Florida.
Okay.
Flanagan's, they have, dozens of locations across Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Really great local feel. You just feel like you're home when you're there.
Yeah.
You're not worried about, so you don't need to wear a suit to go to Flanagan's. You can come in your board shorts if you want to. Yeah. It's a great relaxed vibe and just good food and good times. And then a second one, which is a little bit more of a hidden gem, is Papa's Raw Bar down in Lighthouse Point. Okay. I like them a lot. Because they are an FSU bar, so it's a great place to go watch the games there. Yeah, they have memorabilia up all over the wall and playing the games there, so that's always great. And then they just have awesome selection of really fresh and local seafood. So, when you go in there, it's never the same fresh catch for months and months on end. It's actually rotating. You can tell that it's really just based on what they're catching and bringing in. So great experience. Go check out Papa's Raw Bar as well.
Papa's Raw Bar. And funny enough, when you were at the commercial symposium, you got up on stage and I was sitting with Helene Crisafulli, who's our events director. And I said, man, that guy's got really good hair. So give a shout out to your barber.
I got to give a shout out to Sasha at Man Cave down in Boca. He takes care of me and does a great job there.
Sasha at Man Cave in Boca. Okay, that's not too far from my house, so maybe I'm gonna have to go and see Sasha. Okay, guys, you heard it right here. All things South Florida from Zach Nyberg, and we will see you guys right back here on RWorld Talk.